This final game has asked me to kind of group things, right? Except the elements can belong to more than one of the groups. George, Rita, and Wendy get one or more presentations. So I've used this organizational template. So I can show, George gets Machiavelli, I'll put Machiavelli there. If he gets Jitsuaka, I'll put J there. If he gets Shakespeare's villains, I'll put an S there, right? So if George has Jitsuaka, so does Rita. If Rita doesn't have Jitsuaka, neither does George. If Rita has Shakespeare's villains, Wendy doesn't. So if Wendy has Shakespeare's villains, Rita doesn't. And anybody who does M also does S. Let's answer these questions. An accurate matching of students to their subjects. Answer choice A doesn't have any problems. I mean, George is doing Jitsuaka, and so is Rita. Second, if Rita does Shakespeare, but she doesn't, so that rule doesn't apply. Or say it the other way. If Wendy does Shakespeare, Rita does not. Well, Wendy does Shakespeare and Rita does not. Finally, the third rule, if you do Machiavelli, you also do Shakespeare. George does Machiavelli and also does Shakespeare. Answer choice B violates the second rule. Answer choice C violates this third rule. Answer choice D violates the first rule. And answer choice E violates the third rule again, for those of you keeping score at home. Question 20, which of the following cannot be a complete and accurate list of the students presenting on Machiavelli? Answer choice E, you can't have both Rita and Wendy on Machiavelli. If Rita and Wendy were both on Machiavelli, you do Machiavelli, you also do Shakespeare's villains. But oh no, if Rita does Shakespeare's villains, Wendy does not. You can't have them both doing Machiavelli because you can't have them both doing Shakespeare's villains. Question 21, if Wendy presents on exactly two of the subjects. If Wendy presents on two of the subjects, then the question is whether or not she does Machiavelli, right? Because she either does Machiavelli and Shakespeare, or she doesn't do Machiavelli. She does Jitsuaka and Shakespeare. In other words, there's no way to do Machiavelli and Jitsuaka. So if Wendy does two, that's what she's doing. Either way, she's doing the Shakespeare, which means that Rita is not. If Rita doesn't do the Shakespeare, she doesn't do the Machiavelli. If Wendy does the Shakespeare, Rita does not. If you don't do the Shakespeare, you don't do the Machiavelli. Rita has to do something, so it has to be J. And then what were we asked? What must be true? Oh, Rita presents on Jitsuaka. Question 22. If George presents only on Jitsuaka, the only thing George does is Jitsuaka. So no Machiavelli, no Shakespeare's villains. Well, we have a rule. If George does Jitsuaka, so does Rita. Cool. Now we still have the question of who does the Machiavelli. And maybe Rita does the Machiavelli, in which case she does the Shakespeare, in which case Wendy doesn't do the Shakespeare, in which case Wendy doesn't do the Machiavelli. Wendy must do something, Jitsuaka. If George does Jitsuaka, maybe all three of them do. Or maybe it's not Rita that does the Machiavelli. Maybe Wendy does the Machiavelli, in which case Wendy does the Shakespeare. And if you do, Wendy does the Shakespeare, Rita doesn't. And if you don't do the Shakespeare, you don't do the Machiavelli. George is doing the Jitsuaka, so is Rita. And in this case, I don't know. Maybe maybe Wendy is doing the Jitsuaka. Maybe she's not, but I don't care. What could be true? Rita presents on all three subjects. Yes, this could be true. Finally then, question 23. If Wendy is on Jitsuaka and Shakespeare's villains, Jitsuaka and Shakespeare, but not Machiavelli. Well, if Wendy does the Shakespeare, then Rita must not do the Shakespeare, which means Rita does not do Machiavelli, which means George, somebody had to do the Machiavelli. It must be George, which means he's also doing the Shakespeare. Rita has to do something. It'll be Jitsuaka. I don't know whether or not George does Jitsuaka, but it could be true that he doesn't, that he presents on Machiavelli and Shakespeare, and no Jitsuaka. And remember with all of these, if George did the Jitsuaka, Rachel had to. Rita. Shit. But Rita doing the Jitsuaka? That doesn't tell me anything about George. It's only if Rita doesn't do the Jitsuaka that I know anything about George. That's this fourth game, and that finishes off this section. So here's the deal with these free videos. They're intended to serve a very narrow purpose. For those times when you're wondering, why is that the right answer? You can just come here for a complete library and find out why it was the right answer. And I hope that you'll find that it was very instructive. Of course, the other part of the deal is that since LSAC publishes all of their tests along with test keys, that means that there's no barrier to entry for test prep. And you can hear the air quotes, I hope. Anybody can, and lots of people have, set up shop and call themselves test prep companies, and they've got the questions, they've got the answer keys, and they just try to explain to you why the right answer is right. And then they charge you money for it? That is wrong. I want to put a stop to it. I want to sweep the legs right out from under them. It is bad for you. It's bad for me too. So if you want to know what the right answer is and why the right answer is right, I want you to be able to come here and find it out for free without paying anybody for it. That's very different from what I do in the paid course. What I think has value about what I do is that I can tell you ahead of time what every question wants from you, what to expect from the right answer, how to formulate a right answer, and then how you can expect wrong answers to sound, so that you know before you ever open up a test book exactly what to expect. And all the practice videos that are part of the paid course are just me putting that theory into practice. It's just the rubber meeting the road. In other words, I'm going to show you, based on what we've done before, how we're going to react when it comes up next time. And that bit, knowing what to do the next time you see something, that I think is worth paying for. And if you agree, I'd love to have you in the course. And if not, that's fine too. Don't pay anybody to explain why right answers are right. Just watch these for free. Enjoy.